Okay, we're good to go.
Okay. Welcome to a meeting of the Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee Operating Budget Subcommittee. Today is April 9th, 2025. And is there anybody here who is either recording or our meeting? Please let yourself be known. I see that all of our members of this subcommittee are here. Chris Lawson, Chris King, Tom Keene, and myself, and our liaison, Betty Ludke. So we're ready to go. We have received most of the budget figures this week, but we now have a draft from Tom Keene on the schools. So I guess we could begin by looking at his draft and opening it up for discussion. Tom, you're here somewhere.
Looks like he dropped off again.
Yeah, he's having some computer issues here. He's coming back in now. Lillian, would you like me to share my screen? I can call up Tom's
Oh, here he
draft
comes.
here.
I think. Well,
Right.
here he comes. Tom, we just called on you. We just called on you since you have the draft of the schools, so we were ready to discuss it.
Are we ready to discuss it? I was kind of thinking that it would make sense for people just to have comments and get them back to me. And
Well, if we could look at the draft, we could provide comments, and then we could get those back to you.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not at this point in the place where we want to go line by line through it. And I think it's more, you know, the correctness of the numbers, the analysis, what do we want to put in there? I put out what I did, but obviously this is a committee project.
Yeah. Does anybody have any comments about Tom's draft?
Throw it away.
Well, I thought it was really comprehensive. I thought that the insertion of the inflation figures was very, very helpful. Now, toward the end, when you talked about the 60% and what could be done, I think what we could insert there is a reminder that the 60% does not represent the entire school budget, that there are fixed costs involved.
Yeah, I think it's in some place there, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I think we need to remind people that 60% is part of their budget, but on the other hand, they also have, employee benefits, health benefits, and all of that other stuff. Just in case there is a reconsideration of the 60%.
Right. I mean, your point's a good one, that 80% of that budget is wages and salaries.
Right.
But it's only wages and salaries. And, at least in my world, we typically think that employee benefits add another 25% cost when you add everything in. So you're really talking, potentially another $20 million on top of what we're looking at, the 93 million.
But
at a minimum.
Yeah, that's why I think that we really need to point that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, is it actually possible to get that to get what that number would be with respect to the school employees?
Yeah, yes, it is, Tom. We can certainly provide that, and I think that the best way to do that is to look at the actual net school spending number that is on DESI's website. We have to go through this exercise every year where we have to file an end of year school report, and that report will include not only the direct operating costs, which are in the school department's budget, but it'll also include all the indirect costs that are part of the fixed cost budget. So if you look at those net school spending numbers, that'll give you a better sense as to what the town's commitment to education is. And it's going to include the things like assessments from Sturgis Charter School, assessments from the Cape Cod Regional Tech School and so forth. So, I mean, yeah, the operating budget's 93.6 million, but our total spending on education is far more than that when you add in all of those indirect costs.
Yeah,
And net school spending will show you that.
yeah,
Now, of course, it's also true that for the other departments in the town, much of that expense is staff related too, right? So,
sure.
Yes.
I mean, everybody's spending more than their budget.
Absolutely, yeah. And we did it, we created the fixed cost budget and pooled all employee benefits. And that's at least employee benefits. We pooled them all into the fixed cost part of the budget many years ago from as a recommendation from a previous CFAC committee. Actually, they felt it would be helpful to illustrate what the total employee benefit cost was townwide by consolidating all and including it in the fixed cost category. But we do run an exercise every year where we allocate those costs out, and it is included in what we call the operating budget summary document, and those are available on the town's website. They're towards the very end of that document, that exercise that we show how those costs get allocated out to each department.
And the retirement benefits, are they part of the state system?
Teachers are, but non-teaching positions actually belong to the Barnstable County retirement system. So,
Okay, and are those
school has a
defined
mix.
benefit plans or they
Yes.
are defined benefit?
Yes.
So after yesterday's market rout, we were in bad shape on that, but now we're getting better.
It is crazy. It is crazy
Right.
right now
It is.
to watch what's going on with the markets. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 point swings in the Dow, and 10% in swings in the S&P 500 on a daily basis. There's so much uncertainty out there right now, and it's causing
Right.
a lot of trepidation.
Yeah, I just think back to the analysis you did for the capital spending and the model you built. Wow. I mean, it's got to be updated, but if we had it updated today, we'd have real different assumptions.
Yeah. Well, if you wait a week, it'll be another set.
And I actually
And-
really believe that's the case. I think that this is going to be we'll have a tumultuous few days here.
Not to mention, requests for a 30-year projection on comprehensive wastewater management plan financing.
Right.
We can't get through a week without some significant
Right. I mean,
financial impacts.
You have to project, assuming some sort of stability. And obviously what we've had over since Liberation Day is dramatic and intentional instability. So
Yeah.
hard to project that.
Yeah, I think what you pointed out at the town council meeting last week, Mark, was that we're going to look for increased costs of material.
I mean,
because of the
yeah,
uncertainty of all the supplies.
certainly with the uncertainty out there right now with what's going on, we're just taking a cautious approach. That's all. We're exercising some caution as we implement, $100 million capital improvement plan. We want to double check our figures. We want to, identify those projects where perhaps we need to pull back. Identify those projects where perhaps we can add alternates to make sure that the bids come in under budget. So we're just trying to create awareness that we're proceeding with caution. When we had the pandemic, we did the same thing, actually a little bit more so, proceeded with caution because we didn't know what the outcomes were going to be or what the impacts on the economy were going to be. And so, we're just being cautious. We're not saying, we're not projecting any dire financial consequences or anything like that, but we just want to make sure that everybody knows that we're thinking about what's going on, and we're going to review it on a daily basis and adjust our actions accordingly.
Over the long term, everything's stable. Day to day, not so.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we'll survive in the end.
Yes.
So Tom, I applaud you with the the draft that you put together, and the one piece of data that I saw as being very helpful with some of the discussions that we had with the school committee talking to the CFAC group over the month of January and February was the comparison between the Barnstable School District and the other school districts that are, on our borderline, including Sturgis. I think that it opens our eyes to the some of the differences, some of the main differences that Barnstable School District has to be able to educate its population. And I think that you've started to point out, if not pointed out, that those differences are costly, and that is a responsibility for the town of Barnstable that we need to look at. And I don't think that I looked at the last year's report. I don't think it was ever really discussed in that way, but you've I'll basically say that the statement of Dennis Yarmouth eating our lunch, they're really not,
No,
but they're not. But the other school districts are
to a degree, yeah.
to a degree, and the town of Barnstable's demographics is vastly different than Dennis Yarmouth, but I think doing a very good job as compared to Dennis Yarmouth for the demographic. But I think you highlighted that nicely.
Thank you. I have to say, I was really struck when I went back 15 years and looked at the demographic changes in the population. I was almost blown away that it's gone from 75% white in 2015 to less, in the 40s now. And what was really, really striking to me was that the population, the system-wide population of students has remained roughly the same. So what that really means, it has to, I think, mean in some fashion that you had white families move out or at least not use the public schools, and non-white families using the public schools, because the pie's the same size. It's just the composition that's different over 15 years.
And if you look at I looked at the numbers really closely, and if you looked at the demographics, it was an acceleration in the last 5 years towards the non-white
Yep.
Population, and I think we might have gotten caught a little flat-footed because it was an acceleration that happened so quickly during the pandemic years from
Right.
2000 to 2020 on.
Yeah, one of the things about municipal finance is that municipalities can't react quickly from a financial point of view to dramatic changes like this because of Prop 2.5. And, unless you're getting aid from the outside, and the state aid certainly has not increased dramatically, you have to somehow handle it on your own. But you don't have that ability. You don't have the ability to suddenly raise taxes without going through an override.
I think my question to the superintendent Hearn was regarding the I'll say it wrong, English as a second language. That's not the right. Yeah, and the way that she responded to incorporating the community was very, very positive. I saw a change in her demeanor where she was very excited about what was going on. So I think the momentum is there to handle the demographics, but there's something else that's going on that's causing the cost per student to go up, but still, the demographics are changing the environment in a way that are affecting the finances.
Yeah, the demographics are changing, the needs that are out there and the degree of the intensity that with which they have to approach it. I think what's striking is that on a real basis, that is, inflation adjusted, spending really per student has not climbed up all that high.
No, and and nor in any other district with the exception of Mashpee, which has the highest. Well, I'm sorry, Sturgis has the highest.
Yeah, Sturgis is not comparable because their fixed costs,
Right,
as we were just talking, that's actually buried in their number.
right. So, okay. Anyway, those are my comments, and
Thank you.
I
But I really
appreciate
would appreciate you know, anything written, if there's a typo, please hit me on typos, but anything you can give me and I'll have a revised version posted and ready, I hope for the next meeting.
Tom,
I
are you
wonder-
okay if I share the document with the superintendent?
Yes.
So that they can review and provide any feedback and make sure.
And tell me all the
for
mistakes I
accuracy.
made too. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
We don't want to surprise them. I don't think there's any mistakes in it, but I think it's very well done.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of comments. First is a question because I'm the number one techno dunce on this committee. How do I get to the share documents to insert comments?
So I sent you, I
I've got
sent you
that.
it by email. I would just use
Right.
that and send it back to me. I find that when multiple people are commenting on shared documents, it gets very messy.
So we should send it to you directly.
Please, I think that'd be fine.
Okay. Now the second comment I'm going to make, which is for everybody, our operating budget report has at the end a looking ahead section. So if you could figure out, if each one of us could figure out what important parts we want to point out to the manager and town council about schools or DPW or fixed costs or enterprise funds, or in my case, revenue, that would be helpful because then I'm putting that part together, but it's really a consolidation of all of our comments. So when you're thinking about this, that's another small component of it.
Okay. Yeah, I've got some ideas for you, so I'll send them.
Yeah. They're looking ahead and some of the recommendations because that's this is a ticklish one. We've lost all the ESSER funds. And so,
I don't know.
it adds more pressure to the budget.
Yep. I don't think they're
Yep.
coming back too.
No.
Yeah, I thought it was quite well done. I don't have much else to add. The comparison between school districts, I think, is very helpful for anyone reading the document. And touching on the loss of MCAS as a metric to judge performance is important too. So the school district really needs to come up with some kind of metric to measure how the students are performing
Yeah.
if the state is not going to come up with a replacement. The only other comment I have is that I like your use of the word eleemosynary. I don't even know how to
Eleemosynary?
pronounce that.
Yes, eleemosynary.
It kind of means like beneficial and charitable rolled into one.
Right.
I realize my wife criticized me heavily for using that word.
Oh, I love it. I love
it's
it.
my favorite word
I'm
in the
happy to
document.
drop it if you want.
I thought that was a typo at first. I'm like, what the hell is that? But I looked it up, so I like that.
I think that your section on the change of the demographic is really very, very important for everybody to know because it's significant.
Yeah.
It has a powerful impact on our budget and our teaching capabilities. It really increases our costs.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and one of the things that's striking too is that, at least according to the most recent census, and Chris Kane and I shared this back and forth today, Barnstable town is still 77% white,
Yeah.
which is what the student population was back in 2015. But so the student population is changing and doesn't reflect the population of Barnstable. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that there are fewer white families with children and more retirees? Maybe. I mean, I don't know precisely how that's happening, but it is really fascinating that the school population does not reflect the population of the town at large.
Where are these people living then? Are they coming in from other towns?
Well, Lillian, I think I'm speculating, but I don't think they're coming in from other towns. I mean, I think what you have is a significant rise in a Hispanic population, and I would argue that it's probably younger, that it's not retirees, it's families, and they have children. Meanwhile, as I observe Barnstable, there's a lot of retirees here, and they don't have children who are going to the public schools. I think that might be the change.
Wouldn't this new population of Hispanics and Brazilians and Russians and others show up in our census?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
does.
got these statistics. Well, I'm sorry. Would they show up in the census for all of them? I'm sure they would. But the last census was 2020. And,
That's true.
there's the updates to it are okay, but they're not great. The American Community Survey updates. The school population numbers, the Department of Education, Secondary Education, DESE does track them very carefully year by year. And so you can go back for Barnstable as well as everybody else and see exactly what the population was. That's where I got those numbers. I just didn't break them out by every
Right.
category there.
However, the chart that you did show, Tom, does show the acceleration of the Hispanic community and a deceleration of the white community in the school population.
Correct.
So I think your thesis is correct, or your assumptions are correct about the older population being white, the younger population is being Hispanic, and that's where the young children population is coming from. And as we're talking here, the thoughts that come to mind is we have to help Barnstable embrace the fact that we have a growing Hispanic population, and how do we educate that population for Barnstable, even though the older population, which is the tax burden population, is white.
Yeah. Well,
If
here's
that
a
makes-
hypothesis. During the pandemic, a bunch of people found that they could now work remotely.
Mhm.
And so they moved. But if those people had kids in local schools and those kids had friends around and so on, they didn't move. So the
Mhm.
people who moved to the Cape may very well have been without children.
Mhm.
That's true.
The white people I'm referring to, sorry.
I think that's definitely part of it. Yeah, I'd be curious what the enrollment looks like at all the charter schools and other private schools as well, as far as racial breakdown too.
I can't get the private schools, but I can get Sturgis. And there was a lot of data in here that I was going through, and I'm thinking I'll probably try to go back and start to look at demographics for, the other nearby communities as well as Sturgis.
Yeah, and even Cape Cod Tech,
Yeah.
charter, what is it, Lighthouse Charter School. There's a few other schools around too, but
Isn't Lighthouse in Plymouth, or am I wrong on that?
there's one in Harwich, I believe. And I
Oh,
think
maybe
it's regional, so
Yeah,
Okay.
Lighthouse is down Cape, maybe Orleans.
Okay.
But they're a middle school, charter school, for the middle school grades.
No, not a high
But
school.
it's
yeah,
not high
it's
school.
not high school. Sturgis is the
Oh.
high school, and I
Yeah.
think they're the middle school. And then of course you have Pope John Paul, and
Right.
Right.
next to
Cape
the
Cod
100
Academy,
Barnstable students,
there's a
Cape
few
Cod
other ones.
Academy, Falmouth
Yeah.
Academy.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
I
just
know.
curious if that population reflects a higher percentage of white students, to compensate for the change in the Barnstable population, you know?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Now, I have a question about the Sturgis. Why do I have the idea that the students of Sturgis are not confined to Barnstable residents?
I think it's a regional school.
The kids from all over can apply?
Yeah, I believe
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. So that would not necessarily be reflective of our Barnstable population.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Mark,
Lillian,
do
you're,
do
you're
you know
right.
what region?
Yeah,
Betty, do
it
you know what
just,
region?
well, my son goes to Sturgis West and he has classmates over the bridge. I mean, Plymouth.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Oh, yeah, they pull
Yes.
from quite far and wide, absolutely. So it's
Yeah.
not at all Barnstable.
They do. Most of the students are from, Cape proper, but there are a few from over the bridge as well.
Yeah.
And I think on DESE's website, you're able to get the number of students by community for Sturgis on it. It's on their website.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your comments. I really appreciate everybody.
Well, we'll email you, but I
Please.
still need to know how to log on to transfer materials from my computer over to the shared.
It's
How do you do
There's-
that?
so it's pretty straightforward. Once you're in that folder, there's some commands up to the left, I think, that allow you to just upload a file. So what I
Okay.
did, for example, is I created a folder called whatever operating committee and then uploaded the file into that folder.
Okay.
The folders just help because if you throw bunches of documents in there, you're suddenly
Right.
lost. It's just like a filing
Right.
system.
Right. Okay. So we don't have all of the information and budget figures for the portions that the two Chris's and I are working on. So, but we have scheduled every Wednesday for April. So, I guess, Mark, the question is when we will get all the information so we can begin to do at least a rough draft.
Yes, so I shared with you the general fund revenue projections. So who's ever working
Right.
on revenue, you'd be able to work off of that file. That also included the
got
fixed
that.
cost projections. So who's ever looking at fixed
I've
costs,
got that. Yeah.
you'll have that. The enterprise funds and the municipal operating budgets, we're targeting the end of next week to have those finalized. So that would be the 17th or the 18th. And your report's not due to the town council until May 12th.
Okay. So,
So it sounds to me like next week's meeting's not needed.
yeah, so we probably don't need to meet on the 16th. Should we aim for the 23rd? We should all have some kind of draft by then.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay. And Chris King, if you've got any questions about enterprise funds or fixed costs, Mark Milne is your mentor. And I've done those two sections for a number of years, so
So
we're
I
not gonna
will,
let,
yeah,
we're not,
I will look to both of you. And first off, Lillian, I appreciate you asking the question because I was thinking that I was missing some data and I was looking for it, but I don't have it yet. And so
that's right, you
knowing
don't
that
have,
I don't, right, knowing that I
Yeah.
don't have it, then I now know that I couldn't have gotten started anyway.
right.
Okay.
So now you have a legitimate excuse for not having gotten started.
Well, my procrastination is paying off now.
Okay, well, Tom, thank you for that I really appreciated the thorough work you did. I mean, you covered every aspect of the schools.
Thank you.
That's as thorough as I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of them. Good job. And
Thanks.
anybody who has any comments, send them to Tom.
Please.
Okay, is there any other business to come before the subcommittee? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Okay,